Okay. I get silly with my boy Free Willy. Shout out to Michael Jackson. You know that I am black, son. You take a step back, son. You know I shoot the action. Snap, crackle, pop. What you tryna do with me? I don't know, but you can roll with me on Fattacheenie TV. See me on them Sundays when I'm dropping videos. You know I got the O's like I'm scooping Cheerios, and I like them Fruit Loops. What that mean? I don't know, but you know I gotta go. Okay, here we go. Now I just keep on rapping to the beat. You see me in the shoes and you see me on the street, but I'm not in these streets, cause that's not okay. I like girls, so that means I'm not hey. Gotta keep it clean on this microphone. My girl's in the kitchen when I'm at home, and she's whipping up that food and she's cooking real nice, and you know I get it in the bed and keep it real tight.
Excuse me, what?
What that mean? I don't know. What you doing? I don't know. I got the flow. Okay, I pick my hair like an afro. You can pick me or you can trick me. I don't know, but you see me on the street and you know you can't trick me. You tricked me once, that's shame on you. You tricked me twice, can't put the blame on you. What you trying to do? See, my microphone is blue. I keep on going, and you know I really shouldn't put it with the pudding. What's good looking? Okay, I'm done. But you know you had fun. Hit subscribe button and you know it's all done. All right. I don't know what I just said, but we gonna keep going with it. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Fattacheenie TV, Fattacheenie Reacts. It's your boy Fattacheenie. Let's get into this next Vada video. This next Vada video joint that we're supposed to be working on.
Miquella.
Oh my gosh, this is 47 minutes long. Let's go.
The Unalloyed, creator of the Haligtree, lord of the eclipse, Saint Trina.
But I'm interested about this one, so here we go.
Not just a demigod, but a fearsome Imperian who has been captured but is unresponsive for now. And after watching this video, I think you'll agree that Miquella is a topic that almost has to be explored further in
I don't think I've ever been
DLC.
there.
For how could they not be? Their character is
Shout out to the
surely
DLC.
too major, too foreshadowed, and too intriguing to just ignore. So, let's learn everything that there is to know. For starters, Miquella is the demigod child of Queen Marika and King Consort Radagon, who, as I'm sure you're well aware at this point, are the same being.
You said that like 20 times.
Timeline of events
we got that
from my other videos, but basically, after Radagon left Rennala, the Academy told Radagon to go f himself, basically.
Vada video, I gotta blip that out.
And he sired a third set of demigod children all on his own.
Well, we did say he asexual now. Come on.
Malenia. These children appear to be represented by the butterfly items
Malenia
in the game,
is
and the nascent
Malenia
butterfly appears to represent
is one of their
Miquella.
sisters
Its
too?
description elaborates on his state of eternal childhood, stating that it appears as if it's just emerged from its cocoon for its entire life. Indeed, the word nascent means that something is just coming into existence, and
that boy right there gave me that word.
Future potential.
He was really strong.
That nascence is eternal for Miquella, and I think that this eternal nascence is incredibly important for his character. For Miquella and Malenia both seem to occupy different sides of the life and death cycle. That's not to say that Miquella represents life and Malenia represents death. Rather, it seems like both land somewhere in the middle of each process. Malenia is constantly resisting her scarlet rot and is in this perpetual state of dying. And Miquella is in this constant state of nascence. He is newly born and showing an abundance of life and burgeoning potential. Special thanks to Quailag for making this clear to me. So Miquella is nascent, but he's also abundant, and I think that's another extremely key word for him. For example, there's this cut weapon called the Abundance and Decay Twin Blade, which symbolizes the twins and suggests that the twins were born from an inseparable fate and hold the runes of both abundance and decay between them. Not to mention,
one of the gargoyles?
word abundance is also literally spoken by Miquella in his cut content. And thanks to a very recent discovery by Sekiro Dubi,
that joint is fire.
About to voice is Miquella speaking. And
what sword is
he appears
that?
to be leading you towards a unique ending for the game. and he talks about his ability to
we gotta
make
get
life
that drink. That drink look
stating,
holy too.
"This is for thee, mine abundance, my drop of dew. Quench thy thirst throughout thy frame. Blossom and burgeon, time and again.
He got them
Grow larger,
bars.
stronger, until the day cometh, when thou canst share in my dream. Elden Ring, O Elden Ring, beget order most elegant from my tender reverie." And before I go on, I do want to say that Miquella talking about his abundance is cut content, and you shouldn't really take it as canon, but I think it does give us a deeper look at not only the powers that Miquella might have had, but also the world that he could create. He goes on to say, "If thou covetest the throne, impress
talking
my
in that
vision
King
upon thine
James,
heart.
y'all.
In the new world of thy making, all things will flourish, whether graceful or malign." And I love that final line.
Got that golden vow.
All things will flourish, whether graceful or malign. Because Miquella isn't enforcing any real notions of good or evil here. Instead, in the new world of his making, he simply wants all things to flourish. And
Come on
I feel
now.
like that is a very unique viewpoint for a character in a Souls game. Not to mention, Miquella is certainly one of the few beings that is capable of creating this new world. That's because he is an Imperian. He is one of the very few who were candidates chosen by the Two Fingers to succeed Queen Marika and become a god, to usher in a new age.
But
Now,
what
we could
happened
go
to
into
his
an entire
tree?
debate about why the twins are valid Imperians and why they were born afflicted, but honestly that could almost be an entire video of its own, so for now I'll just give the simple answer, which is that these twins were probably valid Imperians
extra long
because
braid
they
on
have
the right is
singular
weird.
parentage from a god, but that this singular parentage was probably also responsible for their afflictions as well, due to the almost incestual implications of such a thing.
See,
do I
this is
feel like it
why
was
it's
George
getting
R.
too
R.
far.
Martin
Y'all
that wrote
taking this
this
game
part?
too far, y'all. The man with the beard, the chubby man that done wrote all the lore for
Anyway,
this, he
let's
taking
move
it
into
too
the
far.
early
y'all.
childhood years.
Who
of
comes up
Miquella's
with that?
Maternal childhood.
You need prayer.
Miquella's early years were clearly quite inspired by their father, Radagon, who fostered a bit of a fundamentalist streak in his prodigal son, and Miquella would go on to invent fundamentalist incantations of his own,
I can't
dubbed
complain,
Discus
'cause
of
I was
Light
using them
and Triple Rings of Light,
Miquella
which
blades
he gave as gifts
like crazy.
to his
This is it.
father. These gifts reveal that Radagon and Miquella had a good relationship, and Radagon must have been
was a
proud
good
of his son,
dad.
because these two spells do represent
Unlike
those
Godfrey.
two key.
It's been a long while, Morgoth.
You a bad dad, bro. Is that your son? He went out to get some milk and he never came back, y'all.
Key fundamentals of the Golden Order, namely that there is a law of causality, which is a branching cause and effect that goes outwards, but also that there is a law of regression, that
Come on.
all things yearn eternally to
Equivalent
converge
exchange. Shout
once
out to
again. And in
Brotherhood,
gratitude,
Full Metal
Radagon
Alchemist.
counter-
Humankind cannot gain anything without first giving something in return. To obtain something of equal value must be lost. That is alchemy's first law of equivalent exchange.
with a gift of his own, showing Miquella Radagon's Rings of Light. These incantations would go on to become core fundamentalist spells, as they are true to those two concepts that form the basis of the Golden Order.
He was fire.
There is
with it.
another aspect of Golden Order fundamentalism, and that is the persecution of those who live in death. Hunters of
Holy,
these
baby.
undead would attempt to stamp them out with spells such as Order's Blade and Litany of Proper Death, which deal additional damage against those who live in death and prevent them from resurrecting. To recap, those who live in death exist because of Godwyn the Golden, who was one of the early sons of Marika and Godfrey,
Okay, I get
who was
it.
eventually killed with a fragment of the Rune of Death, and then the Rune of Death would eventually spread its undeath throughout
want
the
that
lands
sword
between
too.
via Deathroot. And there is an entire debate that we could have here about whether the persecution of those who live in death is even true to the core principles of fundamentalism. Goldmask certainly doesn't seem to think so. In fact, according to the Order healing
music.
spell, Goldmask laments the hunters of those who live in death, deeming them to be fanatics who wanted nothing more than an absolute evil to
He was
contend
talking all
with.
that rah-rah
And the reason
to
I
me.
bring
He
up
was a
this
little
debate
mean.
at all is
Then he
because
got stabbed
you
by
could
baby
argue
girl.
that Miquella was on the side of these fanatic hunters, as he created multiple weapons that were capable of effectively slaying those who live in death. For example, this is Golden Epitaph, and it is a sword that was made to commemorate the death of Godwyn the Golden, first of the demigods to die. It is infused with the humble prayer of a young boy and reads, "O brother, Lord brother, please die a true death." So this weapon is an effective tool of killing those who live in death permanently, and clearly the young boy who created it was Miquella. We can infer this because the sigil that appears when you use this blade's skill is the Haligtree sigil, and once activated, this ability, called Last Rites, imbues the sword with a holy power that prevents those who live in death from reviving. But beyond this being a potential tool to slay those who live in death, is that this weapon points towards an early kinship between Miquella and Godwyn, a relationship that might have made it all the more painful when Godwyn's soul would perish, but his body would remain, spawning Deathroot. This is interesting, as it gives Miquella a legitimate emotional grievance against those who live in death. And it's almost a bit hypocritical, I think, for what I believe to be Miquella's character, as we previously established that he might have been this character who wants all life to flourish, but I guess that principle might not extend to those who live in death.
Yeah, I was about to say, those that live in death, they ain't coming back.
Of Miquella's relationship with Godwyn. That relationship is potentially strengthened even more when we consider this statue found in Elfale before the Haligtree.
That's not.
It depicts a larger figure
Malenia,
who is clearly embracing the two Imperian twins, Miquella and Malenia. But then, who is this larger figure? It could be their parent, Marika or Radagon, but then it doesn't have their signature hair braid, and instead it has this long, wavy hair. What's more, the statue asset is flat-chested, which appears to rule out Marika, at least. And after reading a good amount of debate online about this, I think it's a fair conclusion to say that this statue represents Godwyn, who himself does seem to have long, wavy hair.
I want to know about his lore,
here really tells a story. It's a story of two gifted but afflicted siblings who were supported by their older brother, but then they were left alone, as their older brother would become the first demigod to die. And this isn't the only statue in this location. Far more prominent in the area are these statues, which depict two siblings left alone after their brother died. There was one sibling, Miquella, who was forced to remain as a young child, and another who grew up in great pain, eventually losing vision and limbs to
she's blind?
and decay. These statues are everywhere in the Haligtree, and they tell that
she given
story.
all that work,
they are an
and
early
she blind
sign of Miquella's
and got
extreme empathy for his sister, and they foreshadow his desperate attempts to give her relief from her terrifying condition. And so the young Miquella abandoned fundamentalism, for it could do nothing to treat Malenia's accursed rot. This was the beginning of unalloyed gold.
We talked about unalloyed gold.
So, what is unalloyed gold? Well, an alloy is something that's created when you combine metals, usually because you want to create a stronger compound at the expense of its purity. So, if we were to view Marika's golden ore
this
as
is
if
where I
it
did
were
all my
a metal,
farming at.
which I think is something that the law wants you to do, considering the implications of the tarnished and everything like that, then Marika's Golden Order would definitely be an alloyed metal. Just think of all the foreign powers that it's absorbed in the interest of strength. For example, Godfrey and his Crucible Knights were enlisted to devastate Marika's enemies.
I was so
the
scared
ancient
of
dragons were won over,
because you couldn't
eventually
stab him
became
in the
part
back.
of Laendel's forces. Even the House of the Erdtree and the Moon were married at one point. Literally. After all, as Muriel puts it, all things can be conjoined under the Golden Order, so I think Marika was definitely open to fusing factions and ideologies to an extent, as long as it made her treasured Golden Order alloy stronger. So, hopefully now you understand what I mean when I say that Miquella's gold is unalloyed. It is pure, it is untainted, and it is, perhaps, a singular ideology. And if you subscribe to the idea that the cut content is still representative of Miquella, then I would say that his ideology is what I had Miquella quote earlier, that in his new world, all things should be allowed to flourish, whether graceful or malign, and that is his pure ideology. Though, of course, that is my speculation based on cut content as well, so please keep that in mind. But Miquella's unalloyed gold couldn't have just been this metaphysical concept of pure ideology. It was a physical material as well. For example, this is an unalloyed gold water lily, said to have been beloved by Miquella. This is a bewitching branch, blessed with an incantation of unalloyed gold. Unalloyed gold decorated the armor and shields of his soldiers, it was inserted into their weapons, and most importantly, perhaps, it was forged into a set of armor for his sister, Malenia. Because, remember, the whole reason Miquella embraced unalloyed gold in the first place, it seems, was because he thought that it could treat his sister's accursed rot, while fundamentalism could not. And he was right, for Malenia's scarlet rot is no mere disease. It's literally the divine essence of an outer god, and Malenia is its vessel that will one day bloom into a true goddess. But unalloyed gold is one of the few materials in the game that can ward away such meddling of the outer gods. Another example are the mirror helms, like the one that EG wears, which literally reflects the influence of the outer gods. And personally, I think the reason that unalloyed gold inhibits the meddling of the outer gods is because it is a pure metal and potentially a pure ideology. But if that's not enough reason for you, then Quailag actually has a great video where she breaks down potential reasons at a chemical level.
Go ahead and check her channel out.
At any rate, reasons aside, Miquella crafted needles of unalloyed gold, which could be inserted into the tortured flesh of one afflicted by rot to alleviate their suffering and forestall the effects of the rot. And true to the needle's descriptions, the outer god of rot isn't the only one affected by this. Our character actually uses the final version of this unalloyed gold needle to subdue the outer god of frenzy, which is something you might want if you decided to be a terrible person and burn down the world. Anyway, when we first find Miquella's needle, it's been broken, snapped in half, and
you could burn the whole world. I would have chose that and be like, y'all living this life of sin.
But once this needle has been
prepared, burn the world.
We can give the golden needle to Millicent, proving that it does indeed work to forestall the rotting sickness, to remove pain and nightmares from the afflicted. It is, after all, lovingly crafted by Miquella himself.
Well, this is a marvel indeed.
I did meet this man.
The work of a true artisan, a meticulous, bold craftsman who grasps the essence of life.
In crafting these needles and pursuing unalloyed gold, Miquella is attempting to save his sister from her affliction. It seems like this objectively good deed, which is a rare sight in Elden Ring, especially for a demigod, whose strengths have been known to tip them towards madness, and that is what makes Miquella such a pure and likable character in Elden Ring. So it's no wonder really that Malenia venerated her brother. She is a character of undefeated prowess. And
baby girl dodged this. She dodged it, y'all. Oh, she dodged it again. Oh, I'm done.
She's an Imperian, no less, and yet she dedicated her blade to Miquella, and Miquella alone, for she believes that he possesses the wisdom, the allure of a god, and that he is the most fearsome Imperian of all. The story of their bond and duty to one another is legendary, and that's something that becomes quite clear when we explore Miquella's Haligtree and see these statues depicting their embrace all around. And if you were one of the many defiled outcasts in Elden Ring, you too might have felt inspired by this story, and you might have felt inclined to earn Miquella's favor and make the long pilgrimage towards your salvation, towards the distant divine Haligtree and its brace that was Miquella's domain. So first, what even is the Haligtree? Well, it's pretty obvious that it's a sort of Erdtree. For one, Erdtree avatars have clearly emerged from it, which they only do in order to protect the Erdtree's own offspring. And then there's the Haligtree Knight armor, which confirms that the Haligtree ultimately failed to grow into an Erdtree. And one thing I've been wondering is, when exactly was the Haligtree planted then? If we knew when, then we might be able to guess at its purpose. Was it planted before or after the shattering of the Elden Ring? Because when the Elden Ring was shattered, golden seeds flew from the Erdtree, scattering across the various lands as if life itself knew that its end had come. These seeds create these little illusory trees and likely spawned the minor Erdtrees as well, so I think it's a fair assumption that Miquella might have planted the Haligtree from an Erdtree seed. And if that was indeed the case, then it should have happened after the shattering, for before that, the Erdtree was considered perfect and eternal, and it wasn't even believed that Erdtree seeds could exist. But on the flip side, the golden epitaph sword that we mentioned earlier likely existed before the shattering, as it was created to commemorate Godwyn's death, and this sword displays the Haligtree sigil when its weapon art is activated, so one could infer that the Haligtree must have existed at this point too, right? So I guess it's always possible that Miquella somehow procured an Erdtree seed before the shattering, or simply grew it from his own being, as he is a scion of the Golden Bough after all. But whatever the case, Miquella clearly decided that growing such a tree was important, and he even went so far as to water it with his own blood. This confirms that the Erdtree is indeed a blood-sucking parasite. Just kidding. Sort of. I mean, you have to admit, it is pretty disturbing that an Erdtree could flourish in such a manner. But this does lead us to the final question, which is, why was the Haligtree planted? What was the point of it? And at the end of the day, the main reason is always going to be because it's like the Erdtree. It's natural to compare them, and the item descriptions seem to want you to compare them as well. The Erdtree is this enormous icon of power and faith in the lands between, so evoking that and inspiring worship is clearly a valuable thing. But the Erdtree was only really an icon of faith in its later years. Before that, it was a symbol of abundance, with light as warm as the gentle sun that could gradually heal all those who bathed in its rays.
Yeah,
but perhaps most importantly,
during
this time of abundance, it
fun.
would drip sacred dew, sap or tears that could bestow blessings, form crystal tears, and even be embedded into talismans. These were treasured things, and naturally, this was an extremely valuable symbol for Miquella to evoke, since he is himself associated with dew and abundance in the cut content. And his Haligtree did drip with dew. The greenish amber of the Haligtree can even be seen in cut content items. It even looks as if it's mingled with a bit of Miquella's own blood. And that signature green hue of Haligtree amber is also seen in the Haligtree Knight sword, which is not a cut weapon, and this was modelled after the Carrion Knight's own swords, except it was embedded with amber from the Haligtree instead of glintstone. Okay, so the Haligtree is a great symbol of faith and power and abundance, and Miquella is related to abundance in the cut content, but what else does the Haligtree add in terms of value? Well, the Haligtree itself is something of a vessel, fit for a god. Miquella plants himself inside it later on. Malenia returns home to it, and speaking of it being a home, many other creatures have made their home within the tree, and within the brace that supports it as well. And I guess you could also argue that the Haligtree might be a sort of a tool to be used. After all, Marika puts the Erdtree to use in such a way, using its roots to absorb people after their death, and perhaps even its branches to rebirth life. And then the Erdtree is later used as a prison, with thorns that are almost entirely impenetrable. But I don't think Miquella planned to use the Haligtree in such a way. Perhaps the biggest difference between the Haligtree and the Erdtree is that the Haligtree was built in a largely inhospitable region. It is extremely difficult to reach, and unlike the Erdtree, it might not really be designed for the benefit of the vast majority of the world. As it stands, the Haligtree strikes me as being more like the Painted World from Dark Souls. It's a place for the outcasts, the heretical, and the malign, not to mention the low and the meek, who are specifically named in the description of the Sacred Crown Helm. While many of
blessed
the
are the
scarlet
meek,
rot-afflicted
and the
seem to be
poor,
here because of the
and the
eventual
alone.
decay of the Haligtree, I think that there are a number of refugees here that would have been here before that,
I feel
namely
bad
the
for killing
Misbegotten,
them.
the Crystallian, these astray mages of Raya Lucaria, and
See,
of
this is
course
why I
Loretta,
needed to
who
watch this
deemed this place
before
to
I
be
go
a great
in there, because my
haven
heart
for
would go
the
out to
despised
them
Albinaurics.
as
The
I'm
second
kicking their
generation
booties.
Albinaurics even carry a weapon called the Ivory Sickle, which reads, "These weapons are evidence of their dedication to the Haligtree, despite never having entered its presence." And we really don't find a single Albinauric within the Haligtree. I'll admit, I do find this a bit strange. You do find quite a few Albinaurics so close to the
they
Haligtree.
didn't make.
It's
Look
a
at
bit
his
strange to me
belly.
they don't go just that little bit further. The reason given for the first generation of Albinaurics not being at the Haligtree is given by Albus, who says that their faded legs
Albus
are the reason for that.
Dumbledore.
But yeah, we find them defending Miquella and his Haligtree all the same at the Ordina liturgical town.
That was
which
annoying
takes us
too.
to the
The wolves
Haligtree
with them
via a
baby
puzzle
girls on top of
within
them.
an Everjail. The word
was
liturgical
annoying.
means relating to public worship, and this town is fittingly filled with many statues of Miquella sitting alone, cradling what might have become the Haligtree back when it was still just a sapling. I also find it interesting that the Haligtree is never called out as competing with the Erdtree, or never called out for housing all these undesirables. Perhaps the House of the Erdtree was happy to see
When them
ungrateful
boys
folk
said-
leave their lands.
I bit myself.
Perhaps the Haligtree was
shooting all them
extremely well hidden from
screenshots from-
everyone and they didn't
what's
know.
his name,
Or
Caterpie?
perhaps Miquella could
John was
just
giving
get
that
away
word.
with it because he was beloved by all. For example, the Bewitching Branch is an item that you can create from Miquella's lilies, and it is blessed with an incantation of unalloyed gold and reads, "The Imperian
Why he put
Miquella
his sword
is
away?
loved by many people. Indeed, he has learned very well how to compel such affection." And that second part that says he has learned how to compel affection, to me that's saying that Miquella is very good at knowing how to inspire others' affection to his own advantage. And nowhere is this more clear, I think, than at Castle Sol.
The eclipse.
This is the Haligtree Secret Medallion. It's furnished with that signature green amber, and it features the Haligtree in the background, for it allows you to access a secret lower level of the Grand Lift of Rold and progress through the consecrated snowfields to this
I'm
secret
not gonna lie,
place.
I had to look that
Having
joint
both
up to
halves
get there.
of this
Oh,
secret
no, I never got
medallion is
here.
therefore extremely desirable, for the medallion has another name. It's called Miquella's Favor.
Miquella's favor can be yours.
These ladies are scaring me.
Slaughter. Slaughter. The all-hearing slaughtered. But alas, it was for naught. But all you need do
She needs some
is snatch it
Mucinex or
from
something,
the
clear up her
big pot.
congestion.
Gideon is the all-hearing man in this dialogue, and he slaughtered an entire village just for one half of this medallion, but he did not find it in Albus's possession.
Dang.
But you can. And the other half is at Castle Sol, right before
No,
a
I did
nameless
get
phantom
this.
who says this: "Lord Miquella, forgive me. The sun has not been swallowed. Our prayers were lacking. Your comrade remains soulless. I will never set my eyes upon it now. Your divine Haligtree." So this phantom seemingly has, or I guess had, one half of the medallion, and yet he laments that he will now never set eyes upon the Haligtree.
He didn't make
To
it.
me, this suggests that Miquella might have been withholding the second half of the medallion from him, or that this phantom believed that he could solicit the second half of the medallion from Miquella and make it to the Haligtree if he achieved his goal here at Castle Sol and basically earned Miquella's favor. But what exactly was supposed to happen here at Castle Sol? What does it mean when the phantom says, "The sun has not been swallowed, our prayers were lacking, your comrade remains soulless"? It
His
means,
comrade.
I think, that the residents of Castle Sol and Miquella were attempting to restore the dead soul of Godwyn the Golden And just to refresh your memory, when a fragment of the Rune of Death was used to kill Godwyn, it was also being used at the exact same time to kill Ranni, and since they perished at the same time, Ranni lost her body, and Miquella's demigod brother, Godwyn, perished in soul alone.
Wait, what?
Despite this death seeming so final, Miquella clearly believes that some sort of ritual performed
When did
here
Ranni
could
get involved
restore
in all
the
of it?
soul
Oh,
of his comrade.
Fattacheenie, we knew
For
that.
example, here's some more dialogue from a different phantom that reads, "O great sun, frigid sun of soul, surrender yourself to the eclipse, grant life to the soulless bones." But the question is how? How does that work? How does an eclipse restore life to Godwyn? Now, you can just take Miquella at face value and trust that he knows what he's doing, or we can try to learn as much as we can about the eclipse and see if we can reason out the mechanism behind this process. So at Castle Sol, we find the Eclipse Chotel, which reads, "Storied sword and treasure of Castle Sol that depicts an eclipsed sun drained
be
of
fired
color.
to dual
In Sol,
wield
the
those.
sight of an eclipse inspires a dreadful awe, preventing an onlooker from averting his gaze." The most important part of this description, though, is the part that says it's the storied sword of Castle Sol, as this proves that the veneration of the eclipse here goes back a long way. But what does an eclipse represent? So, according to the Eclipse Crest shields, the eclipsed sun, drained of color, is the protective star of soulless demigods. Honestly, I think calling it a protective star is kind of the closest we come to understanding the mechanism here, because you could reason that a protective star might be a sort of outer god that lends them power, though that is just speculation. The description goes on to say that the sun in eclipse is said to be the symbol of the wandering mausoleum where the soulless demigods slumber. So note that it says demigods plural here. Now, this could be because the wandering mausoleums come to house many demigods from a gameplay point of view, because you can take their remembrances here, but it could be a word that is slightly lost in translation, as the Japanese version of the word demigods does not specify whether it's a plural or whether it's a singular word. So my take on this is that I think the wandering mausoleums became necessary when Godwyn died. I think that the mausoleum was intended to be a resting place for him initially, but then also for any future demigods, as all of a sudden all of their true deaths had become possible as well, with the theft of a fragment of the Rune of Death. The Mausoleum Knights themselves are these headless soldiers who behead themselves, willingly following their master into death. As such, they become these headless spirits, tied to the land so that they might better defend the walking mausoleums. They also carry eclipse-crested shields, and the eclipse is said to aid the Mausoleum Knights by keeping destined death at bay. It is their symbol, and by keeping destined death at bay, maybe it's helping to keep their souls tied to the land. We could speculate for a long time on how the eclipse has this power.
Where that horse's
I've done my
head?
best.
I just
maybe
realized
other people
that.
have a better take on it, and maybe you guys do in the comments, but in the end, it's simpler just to trust that Miquella knew what he was doing with the eclipse at Castle Sol, where he wanted to block out the sun and restore Godwyn's soul.
That move,
Well,
oh
that's
damn, I was
it.
about to
We
say,
can't
that
trust
move
him
must
too
be
much,
so
I guess,
powerful.
because it's important to remember that this ritual failed. According to this phantom, the sun was not swallowed. And I guess the protective star of the soulless demigods did not listen to their prayers, and it did not appear. But it is really fascinating to learn that such a thing might even be possible. That Godwyn, whose soul seems to be as dead as Ranni's body, might actually not be. So if his soul is somewhere, then where has it fled to? A part of
just
me
look like
wonders
a
if
bunch
his
of
soul
poo-poo
is
right
lost,
there.
then maybe it's lost within a dream. One theory I did come up with
Come on,
regarding
Inception.
the
Dream within a dream, huh? I'm impressed.
mechanism by which Godwyn's soul is brought back by the eclipse is that his soul might be brought back by bringing about a sort of artificial dusk with the eclipse. That's
Now, is
because
this gonna
those who
have
live
to
in
do
death are called the
something with
Duskborn,
the- with
after
the
all,
DLC?
so there is an association between night and death, to be sure.
There
And there's
go
also
my
an
girl that was
association
trying to
between
sleep
death
with me
and
that
sleep.
whole game.
For example, when you pursue Fia's questline, you use her as a medium to enter Godwyn's deathbed dream, which is an entire dreamscape where the dragon Fortisax is futilely fighting against the death in his companion. And then there's Roger, who speaks
My
this
boy
line of
with the
dialogue
bad Taco
as he is on
Bell.
the precipice of succumbing to Deathroot.
Maybe I should tell you. Lately, I feel I'm on the precipice of falling into a deep, fathomless slumber.
He does say he's about to fall into sleep. So, in conclusion, a realm of death does seem accessible through
Never
dream.
got there.
And I think this is the perfect time to mention that Miquella has an alter ego. Some say she is a comely young girl. Others are sure he is a boy. This is where we have to talk about the enigmatic figure named Saint Trina.
Wait, what? Y'all bringing in what? Yo, hold up, Saint Trina.
Perhaps the biggest in-game
What?
clue
I've
about
never
Saint Trina's
seen her
true
in my life.
identity is Trina's lily, which bears this undeniable resemblance to Miquella's lily of unalloyed gold. Its description reveals that it is a symbol of faith in Saint Trina, dulls the senses, preventing agitation. Naturally, it can be used to craft a bunch of sleep-afflicting items like Saint Trina's arrow, which states that the sweet oblivion of sleep can
Right in
become
his
quite the
kneecap,
habit,
yeah.
and it tells of the priests of Saint Trina who use these arrows to spread their teachings.
Imagine
though the
being-
Japanese description seems to
being put to
specify
sleep
that
'cause you
these
got
were
shot
more
in
of a
the
tool
knee, yo?
used for their rituals. So it's largely left to your imagination as to what rituals these priests might have been performing, though I will mention that it seems
ain't
Saint
gonna lie,
Trina
her
might
outfit is
actually be
fire.
able to be found somewhere within sleep. This is suggested by Feather's cookbook, which reads, a record of crafting techniques left by a man who was utterly captivated by Saint Trina. He continued the search for her in his slumber. We get a side profile of her in the hilt of Saint Trina's sword, which hints at that flowing astray
Sir,
hair that she has.
how did you
Then we get
zoom
a
in
much
that
better
close to
front-on
see
view
that?
of this feminine adult form upon Saint
That's
Trina's
why he
torch.
got millions of
The
subscribers
carvings
and I
depict
don't.
Saint
You
Trina,
got the
but in
time.
adult form, somewhat unnervingly. The carving is indeed unnerving, and it's certainly strange considering Miquella is supposed to be eternally a child. It raises the question, what has to happen for Miquella to grow up into this? And why is this bizarre creature the adult form that he takes? Another question worth asking, I think, is whether Miquella even has total control of Saint Trina. What if he's in a similar situation to Marika Radigan, where their alter ego is an opposite of sorts, and able to act almost as if they have their own free will? So all of this is definitely a little bit of a disturbing view of what
Where
Saint
is
Trina
this?
could be, but
I've
I guess
never
we
been
do
to
have
this
cut
spot.
content that does somewhat reassure me that their alter ego is still a benevolent person. This cut content was first showcased by Sekido Dubi, and this cut content is truly ancient. It exists in one of the oldest versions of the game that we know about, so a lot has probably changed since then.
It looks
but
sick,
regardless,
though.
here we can learn about Saint Trina's crystal ball, which once read, a crystal ball full of mist, symbol of Saint Trina of the Cradle Song, copies dream mist from a sleeping being. Dream mist was once used as an ingredient in rare and potent physics. May the quietude of slumber come to all and sundry, even to those whose red eyes burn with the flames of frenzy. So this reveals that this cut version of Saint Trina even once had sympathy for those afflicted by the flame of frenzy. They even went so far as to teach the merchants
Dang, there
their
go my
songs.
boy. What was his name
Our
again?
song derives from an old lullaby, sung for us long ago, deep inside our tomb. But whoever it was sings no longer. Its melody allowed us to sleep, despite the cursed flame.
The description of Miquella's songs as a lullaby
Ooh,
is
right in his
referenced by
kneecap
the
too.
modern-day sleep pot description, which reads, like a lullaby or a quagmire, its light purple haze
Shout out to
irresistibly
Quagmire.
draws its
Giggity,
victims
giggity.
down into sleep. Sweet dreams. This is the closest thing we have to Dream Mist as well, which was an item that you could again once collect from sleeping enemies. And after you did this, you were supposed to sell this Dream Mist to the merchants, who used it to quell their flame of frenzy. But as the merchants once said,
Oh, the
whoever
merchants
it
have
was that
flame of
sings
frenzy?
now sings no longer. And this is a detail that has remained intact even
got
in the
a
final
hand on
version
his sword?
of Elden Ring, with Saint Trina's sword stating that Saint Trina's appearance was as sudden as their disappearance. Something
Oh, dang, he
clearly
got the
happened
sleep
to
sword,
Miquella
too.
that prevented them from continuing their work as Saint Trina. And that is what we will discuss next.
Okay, here we go.
At some point, Miquella embedded himself into the Haligtree. Why he did this is never explicitly stated, but I think we can make a good attempt at puzzling it out. So, Miquella famously watered the Haligtree with his own blood, since it was a sapling, so I guess you could argue that he embedded himself in it to simply feed the tree more, which I guess is possible because the tree does eventually wither without Miquella inside it, and Gideon seems to tie his removal with the death of the
that's why it doesn't grow anymore.
It's turning into a husk. But I don't think that can be the only reason why he embedded himself. For instance, look closely at the Haligtree roots, and you'll see the form of a tree-like woman, and where her womb should be, there's a gap that once contained Miquella's cocoon cradled by the Haligtree. Now, either Miquella was attempting to fuse into and become this woman-like figure, who might even be the adult form shown on St. Trina's torch, or there was a rebirth occurring here. This is a cocoon within a womb, after all, so rebirth could have been the intent here.
Okay.
But regardless, it seems things ended prematurely, for Miquella would eventually be ripped out of the womb and the Haligtree would split and decay.
Wait, why did Mohg do that?
When we arrive at the Haligtree
remember.
and the town of Elfale that is built into the brace that supports it, the music here hits extremely hard. This place is just so sorrowful.
Yes.
For the Haligtree and Miquella's lilies and even St. Trina's lilies are all wilting, and all who live here are just hoping and praying for their lord to return. I love the little detail of the guards looking outwards and sitting dejectedly. To make matters worse for them, it was here that they realized that the sacred light inside them would explode upon their imminent deaths, and yet, in spite of this, their spirit ashes show their faith and state, "May the flash of our deaths guide Miquella's return." And Malenia is here too, holding to the husk of Miquella, dreaming and waiting for Miquella to return, and believing full well that he will.
Corpse after corpse
why did he take him?
As I awaited his return.
Malenia's set reveals that she believes her brother will keep his promise. So what was that promise, I wonder? Was it merely to return, or was it something more? How much does Malenia know? Why did she fight Radahn? We'll have to talk about all of that in another video. So there is still faith. There's even this one phantom in the consecrated snowfields who has somehow puzzled out who took Miquella, and even where they are, he is pointed towards the portal that takes you to Mohg Palace and Mohg the Omen. So, indeed, it was the demigod Mohg who somehow broke into the Haligtree and absconded with Miquella's infant form. And it's with him that this story ends. Or maybe it's where this story truly begins.
Okay, here we go. Yo, I'm not gonna lie, this is a long video, but this is the best one.
So, if you're not familiar, Mohg is the omen son of Godfrey and Marika.
Yes.
And being an omen of royalty, he was born into a wretched mire of filth in the subterranean shunning grounds below Leyndell capital. But unlike his brother Morgoth, who reviled his accursed blood, Mohg reveled in it. And it was assumedly because of this accursed blood that he chanced a meeting with an outer god called the Mother of Truth. And as Mohg stood before her, deep underground, his accursed blood erupted with fire, and he was truly besotted with the defilement that he was born into. Mohg is just one of many characters who discovers a new identity in the ways that they have been discarded by the world. And how could he not? For his defilement was validated by nothing less than an outer god. And as always, we know
we
very
gotta
little
fight him,
about this outer god.
That's the first thing we do for DLCs. We go fight him.
The formless mother.
And we gonna bring JJ to this fight, because JJ hasn't beat him either. And that'll be the kickoff to the new section.
The followers can thrust their
our Elden
arms
Ring
into
journey.
her body to scatter blood flame, and followers of Mohg can share in the Lord of Blood's power and send blood flies before them. There's even been some speculation in my recent shorts and my TikToks as well that the Formless Mother is also an outer god called the Bloodstar. But The one thing that all outer gods seem to have in common is that they all require vessels to move through. So in this case, the Formless Mother's vessel was Mohg. For example, the sacred spear that he wields is a weapon, but it's also an instrument of communion, and Mohg may well be doing her bidding with his actions. These actions included him starting a new dynasty called Godwyn, deep below the earth, in the grounds of these ancient dynastic remains. This is a secret place, difficult to reach, and it was here that Mohg brought the infant Miquella, torn as he was from his cocoon. I mean, that's how we see him in his opening cutscene, but in-game, Miquella seems to be back with a new cocoon here. You can even see it sat upon this giant pelvic bone, which seems to be a reference to the womb of the Haligtree woman that he was literally ripped from. And it's from the remembrance of the Bloodlord that we can learn of Mohg's intent here. He wished to raise Miquella to full godhood and become his consort, taking the role of monarch. To this end, Mohg has begun soliciting blood offerings to Miquella, and that certainly explains the state of so many who reside here. According to the Lord of Blood's exaltation talisman, he proclaimed, "Render up your offerings of blood to your lord, drench my consort's chamber, slake his cocoon's thirst. His awakening shall herald the dawn of our dynasty." And then, to return to Mohg's remembrance, it's stated that, so far, this has all been in vain, for no matter how much of his bloody bedchamber Mohg tried to share, he received no response from the young Imperian. So maybe nothing will happen. Or maybe, according to the Pure Blood Knight's medal, it is not yet time, for Mohg yet slumbers beside the divinity. Be patient, the new dynasty is nigh. What do you think? I mean, it's kind of hard to know. Even Gideon has no clue. But something does seem to be happening to Miquella in there. He has clearly grown, for one, since being taken. So maybe his adult form is manifesting? And personally, this is really speculation, but this reminds me a lot of Berserk, which
I was about to say,
know Miyazaki is always inspired by. Spoiler warning, really, you should watch that show, but there's this moment at the very end of the first chapter where Griffith betrays his companions in this sacrificial ceremony of carnage and bloodshed in order to be inaugurated and reborn as a god within an egg of sorts. This really reminds me of that. It also reminds me of a scene with Griffith where he allows himself to be
one of the
abused,
craziest.
Basically, in order to get what he wants.
Is the
so
light
I wonder,
word.
What
light
if this
word
was
for what
also
happens.
what Miquella wanted? We know that he is extremely proficient at compelling others to love him, and Mohg is
But if you
clearly
look like that, you gotta stay in that
we know
cocoon
that
a little bit
Miquella
longer,
is an
bro.
Imperian prodigy, and
Ain't nobody
we know
trying to
that
look
his
at
sister,
that.
who knows him best, has total faith that he will return. So you'd think he's still in control of the situation somehow, but that could be a part of the tragedy, and Miquella, this benevolent being, might not have predicted this at all, and is now being completely taken advantage of. Or maybe he did intend to be taken, but he's going to get more than he bargained for with the Mother of Truth. Or maybe Miquella's fate really is long gone. There's one other thing I want to mention. There is this place called Miquella's Hideaway in the Altus Plateau, and here we can loot Amber Starlight, which Celovus mentions is the very fate of a demigod. Clearly, since it's here, you'd think it's Miquella's fate, right? And then you also have to consider that the cut content that we are basing so much of this video on is very much removed from the game, because it might not fit the developer's intent. That's always possible. So I really do hope you all bear that in mind, as I would really hate to promote ideas that are against the developer's vision for this character. But I really do think that it's a possibility that we're going to one day enter the dream of this slumbering demigod. After all, there was once a cut character called Rico who was supposed to say the following, standing before Miquella's cocoon at Mohg Palace. He says, "Finally, I have found it. St. Trina's, no, Lord Miquella's cadaver, such that I may aid you,
Rico?
O Lord. So please, I hope you welcome your humble servant Rico into your dream, the world of your heart. Indeed, I beg you grant my wish, that when you transcend from Imperian to God, allow me a place by your side.
That's definitely DLC.
Plus,
That's
if we do get DLC, it's going to need a new Great Rune to acquire, right? That's a huge gameplay mechanic in these games, and it'd be weird if DLC came and you couldn't get more Great Runes. Apart from Miquella's Great Rune, the only one we don't know about also is Rani's Great Rune, which was allegedly cast aside. So there's always that to consider. But hopefully we get some DLC to answer these questions, or more likely we'll get DLC that will give us more questions than we started with.
That's exactly right.
Always how it seems to go. But I really hope they throw us some good curveballs with this one, as they always do. But regardless, it's always a ton of fun to speculate with you all, so if you're still listening to this extremely long video, thank you for giving me your time today. Thank you to Quelaag for reviewing the script for me. Thank you, Miss Pap, for the incredible visuals, as always.
Give it up, y'all. This was a
I also want to give a sincere and really reverential shout out to Eugenia Lysa, who created the speculative visuals of Saint Trina. Please follow her work in the description. She's one of the most talented artists that I've ever known. And yeah, thank you, as always, of course, for watching my videos, and I'll see you next time.
Okay, about a video. That was a great video. I'm not gonna lie, I'm happy that I made it through. That was a long one. Pause. Oh no. He added a new joint to the playlist. We not doing, oh my gosh. He just added that joint a couple days ago. He added that joint like today. Y'all. If you're not part of the Fattacheenie fam, please hit subscribe to the channel. And if you like the video, give the video a like. I really enjoyed this video. This was one of his best ones, I think, personally. I was really intrigued about Miquella. I'm talking too much. Listen, I hope you have a blessed one. I'll see you on the next one. Later.